4,000 years of silence. The deadly humans who came to our rescue Cathara brushed the ancient dust from the stone tablet with careful fingers. The symbols carved into its surface were unlike anything in the galactic databases. She had been digging on this dead world for 3 months, and every artifact she found made less sense than the last. "Another human relic?" asked Veltar, her research partner. The tall Zephyrian walked over, his blue skin gleaming in the light of the distant sun. "The Confederation Council will be pleased. They love learning about the peaceful humans who left us alone to grow." Cathara frowned. "These symbols don't match the peaceful records. Look at this." She pointed to a series of sharp angular marks. "These look like warnings." The peaceful galaxy had known only harmony for 4,000 years. Every species in the Galactic Confederation had grown beyond the need for violence. Wars were ancient history, spoken of only in whispers by historians. The most aggressive thing anyone did was debate art styles during cultural festivals. Humans had vanished exactly 4,000 years ago, leaving behind only scattered ruins and stories of a curious species that explored the stars. Most people believed they had transcended physical existence or moved beyond the galaxy to find new wonders. The humans were remembered as gentle philosophers and brave explorers who had chosen to leave rather than disturb the growing peace. "Help me move this stone block," Cathara said. "I think there's something underneath." Together they lifted the heavy stone. Beneath it lay a metal box untouched by time. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly with an inner light. As Cathara touched it, the box opened with a soft hiss. Inside was a crystal data storage device still functioning after all these years. She connected it to her portable scanner, and holographic images filled the air around them. The first image showed a human face, scarred, tired, with eyes that had seen too much. When the human spoke, the words were translated by Cathara's device. "If you're seeing this, they've returned. We hoped we were wrong. We prayed 4,000 years would change something. But the cycle always repeats. More images appeared. Massive ships, dark as space itself, tearing through peaceful fleets. Worlds burning, cities crumbling, billions dying. The devourers," the human continued. "They come from the space between galaxies every 4,000 years. They eat everything, matter, energy, life itself. We barely survived their last visit. Most of humanity died fighting them." Veltar stepped backward, his face pale. "This must be fiction. Some kind of entertainment story. There's no violence in the galaxy. There hasn't been for millennia." But Cathara kept watching. The human's face was too real, too filled with genuine pain. "This wasn't fiction. We made a choice," the recording continued. "We could stay and fight again when they returned. But fighting them changes you, makes you into something hard and dangerous. We didn't want to poison the peace that would grow in our absence. So we're leaving, going into deep sleep until they come back." The recording showed humans boarding massive ships, their faces grim with purpose. Children crying as they left their homes. Families saying goodbye to friends of other species. "We scattered warning beacons throughout the galaxy. If you find this message, find the others. Learn what we learned. Prepare as we prepared. And when the time comes," the human's voice grew harder. "Wake us up." The recording ended, leaving Cathara and Veltar staring at empty air. "We need to contact the council immediately," Veltar whispered. Before Cathara could respond, her communication device screamed with emergency alerts. Both archaeologists grabbed their equipment and ran to their ship, where the main communication array was, receiving signals from across the galaxy. The first message made, "Cathara's blood freeze. This is Admiral Senthok of the Confederation Defense Fleet. All civilian ships, retreat to inner systems immediately. We are under attack by unknown vessels. They appeared from dark space without warning. Our entire outer perimeter is gone." More messages followed, each one worse than the last. "Station Kepler 7 is not responding. Last transmission showed massive biomechanical ships. They're not taking prisoners. Every world they touch becomes empty. Nothing left but dust. These creatures, they're eating our ships, our people, everything. Traditional weapons have no effect." Cathara activated their ship's scanners and pointed them toward deep space. What she saw made her legs weak. Thousands of dark shapes moving between the stars, each one larger than a Confederation city. They moved with purpose, consuming everything in their path. "The humans were right," she whispered. "The devourers have returned." Veltar was frantically copying the human warning data. 4,000 years of peace and we forgot how to fight. We don't even have real weapons anymore. The defense fleet uses ceremonial lasers and stun beams. Another message came through, this one from the planet Xerion, home to 12 billion people. Help us. They're here. The ships, they're enormous. They're taking apart our cities molecular by molecular. Our children. Someone please. The transmission cut to static. Cathara's hands shook as she entered the coordinates for the nearest human ruin site into their navigation system. The humans said they scattered warning beacons. We need to find them all, learn everything we can. Even if we find their warnings, what good will they do? Veltar asked. The humans are gone. They've been gone for 4,000 years. No, Cathara said, remembering the final words of the recording. They're not gone. They're sleeping, and they told us to wake them up. Their small ship lifted off from the dead world, leaving behind the peaceful archaeological dig that had become something else entirely. The first step toward the galaxy's survival. As they traveled through space toward the next human site, they passed refugee ships fleeing the outer systems. Families who had never known fear now huddled in cargo holds. Their perfect worlds turned to dust behind them. The peace that had lasted 4,000 years was ending, and the creatures responsible moved through space like a dark tide, consuming everything. But somewhere in the galaxy's distant reaches, in ships hidden from all detection, humanity slept, and in their sleep they dreamed of war. Cathara watched the stars and tried not to think about what kind of species chooses exile to protect others from its own nature. What had the humans become during their first war with the Devourers? What would they be like when they woke up? Soon, she thought with growing dread and desperate hope, they would all find out. The peaceful galaxy was about to meet its violent guardians. 4,000 years of silence. The deadly humans who came to our rescue 3 weeks had passed since the first Devourer attack. Cathara stood in the emergency council chamber on the capital world of Zentara, watching the galaxy's leaders argue over holographic displays showing the advancing enemy forces. 47 worlds have gone silent, reported Admiral Senthok, his usual calm manner replaced by barely controlled panic. The Devourers aren't just destroying our cities. They're dismantling entire planets, breaking them down into raw materials. Council leader Thexana, a graceful being whose species had given up all forms of aggression 500 years ago, raised her hand for silence. Surely there must be a peaceful solution. Have we tried communicating with them? We've sent every type of communication signal we know, Admiral Senthok replied. They don't respond. They just consume everything. Cathara stepped forward, her portable scanner displaying the human warning data she had collected from 17 different ruin sites. Honored Council, I believe I found our answer. But you're not going to like it. She activated the holographic display, showing the assembled leaders what she had learned. Images of ancient battles filled the air. Ships engaged in brutal combat, weapons that tore space itself apart, and through it all humans fighting with a ferocity that made several council members step backward. The humans didn't leave because they transcended violence, Cathara explained. They left because they were too good at it. They fought the Devourers 4,000 years ago and won, but the victory changed them into something the galaxy couldn't accept. Impossible, whispered Counselor Yethmar. The humans were peaceful explorers, artists and philosophers. Before the first Devourer War, yes, Cathara agreed. But war changes people. The humans who survived became something else. Something dangerous. They chose exile to protect us from what they had become. She showed them the final piece of data she had found. The location coordinates of the human sleep ships, hidden throughout the galaxy's outer rim. Massive vessels, each one containing millions of humans in suspended animation. They're still out there, she said, waiting. Admiral Senthok studied the coordinates. Some of these positions are in sectors we can still reach. The Devourers haven't advanced that far yet. But should we wake them? Asked Thexana. If they're as dangerous as you suggest. Before anyone could answer, another emergency alert filled the chamber. The face of Captain Morthak appeared on the main screen, his ship clearly under attack. This is the civilian transport Star of Peace. We're carrying refugees from the Xerion system. The Devourers have found us. Our escorts are gone. Please, we have children aboard. The transmission cut to static. On the tactical display, the ship's signal vanished. How many more will die while we debate? Cathara asked quietly. Thexana closed her eyes, a gesture of deep thought among her people. When she opened them again, her decision was clear. Admiral, take a fast ship to the nearest human vessel. Wake them up. Admiral Senthok nodded and left immediately. Kethara followed. Her archaeological expertise needed to operate the human technology. The journey to the first sleep ship took 18 hours of travel through increasingly dangerous space. Twice they had to change course to avoid Devourer scouts. When they finally reached the coordinates, Kethara gasped at what she saw. The human ship was enormous, a dark, angular mass 15 kilometers long. It looked nothing like the graceful Confederation vessels with their flowing lines and artistic decorations. This was clearly a machine built for war, even while serving as a place of sleep. How do we get inside? Admiral Senthok asked. Kethara consulted the human data files. The warning messages included access codes. They expected this day would come. The docking process was unlike anything in Confederation technology. The human ship's systems scanned them thoroughly, analyzing their biology, their intentions, even their emotional states. Only when it was satisfied did the massive doors open. Inside, the ship was a maze of corridors lined with sleep pods. Millions of them, each containing a human form suspended in time. Emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow that made shadows dance on the walls. The central command pod should be near the ship's core, Kethara said, following the ship's layout maps. They found it 20 minutes later, a larger pod surrounded by command interfaces. The human inside was a woman, perhaps 40 years old with short dark hair and scars on her face. Her name, according to the pod's display, was Captain Sarah Chen. Kethara initiated the wake-up sequence, following the instructions she had memorized. The pod filled with light and the human inside began to stir. Captain Chen's eyes opened slowly, then snapped into sharp focus. She sat up immediately, her hand reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. When she saw Kethara and Admiral Senthok, her expression became carefully neutral. How long? She asked, her voice rough from 4,000 years of sleep. Exactly 4,000 years, Kethara replied. The Devourers have returned. Captain Chen closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, Kethara saw something that made her step backward. These weren't the eyes of a peaceful explorer. They were the eyes of someone who had seen war and death and had learned to be very good at both. Status report, Captain Chen said, moving to the command interfaces with quick, efficient movements. Admiral Senthok explained the situation, the Devourer attacks, the fallen worlds, the Confederation's inability to fight back. Captain Chen listened without expression, occasionally asking questions that revealed a tactical mind far beyond anything the peaceful galaxy had produced in 4,000 years. You've lost 47 worlds in 3 weeks, she summarized. Your defensive fleets are using ceremonial weapons against an enemy that eats matter itself. And you've made no preparations for war because you forgot it existed. That's correct, Admiral Senthok admitted. Captain Chen activated the ship's communication systems and began sending wake-up signals to other human vessels throughout the galaxy. We prepared for this day for centuries before we went to sleep. Every human on these ships has genetic memories of the last Devourer War. We know how to fight them. Genetic memories? Kethara asked. We made sure our children would remember what we learned, Captain Chen explained. The price of victory, the cost of survival, the knowledge needed to win. It's all passed down, generation to generation, even in sleep. Around them, the ship began to wake up. Lights came on in corridors they hadn't seen. The hum of enormous engines starting echoed through the hull. And in the distance, other pods began opening. How long until your people are ready? Admiral Senthok asked. Captain Chen checked the ship's status. 6 hours for basic crew, 12 hours for full combat readiness. But Admiral, she turned to face him directly. Before we begin, you need to understand something. We're not the humans you remember. War changed us, made us into something harder, something that can do what needs to be done to stop the Devourers. She gestured to a display showing Devourer movements. They've advanced farther than I hoped. We're going to have to act fast and hit hard. Some of the things we'll do will horrify you, but they're necessary. We understand, Admiral Senthok said. No, Captain Chen replied quietly. You don't, but you will. As more humans woke around them, Kethara noticed something that chilled her. These people moved differently than anyone she had ever seen. Every gesture was efficient, purposeful. Their eyes constantly scanned for threats. They spoke in short, clipped sentences that wasted no words. These were not the curious explorers of legend. These were warriors who had been shaped by necessity into something the peaceful galaxy had never imagined. And as the human ships began powering up throughout the galaxy, Kethera wondered if they were about to be saved or conquered. The humans were awake. The real war was about to begin. 4,000 years of silence. The deadly humans who came to our rescue, Kethera, watched from the bridge of Captain Chen's ship as the first human fleet engaged the Devourers. What she saw challenged everything she thought she knew about warfare. The Confederation had fought the Devourers with honor and failed. Their ships approached in neat formations, announced their intentions, and used weapons designed to disable rather than destroy. The result had been slaughter. The humans fought differently. Target the lead bioship's feeding appendages, Captain Chen ordered. Fire pattern Delta 7. The human weapons didn't announce themselves with bright beams or colorful explosions. They struck silently, tearing holes in space itself. The targeted Devourer ship writhed as its feeding mechanisms were severed, black fluid streaming into space. Second wave. Hit the nerve clusters. Third wave, prepare boarding pods. Boarding pods? Admiral Senthok asked from his position beside Captain Chen. You're going inside those things? Information warfare, Captain Chen explained without taking her eyes off the tactical display. The Devourers are a hive mind. If we can access their communication networks, we can turn their coordination against them. Kethera watched human soldiers launch themselves in small, fast pods directly at the wounded Devourer ships. The pods punched through biomechanical armor and disappeared inside. Minutes later, the Devourer formations began acting strangely. Ships colliding with each other, weapons firing at random targets. How are they doing that? She asked. We learned during the First War that the Devourers rely on constant communication between ships, Captain Chen said. Disrupt that communication and they become confused. Our people inside are feeding false information into their networks. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it ended, 17 Devourer ships were destroyed or disabled and 0 human ships were lost. But Kethera noticed that not all the boarding pods returned. Those soldiers who went inside the Devourer ships, she said quietly, they're not coming back, are they? Captain Chen's face remained expressionless. The biomechanical environments inside Devourer ships are toxic to human life. Our people knew this when they volunteered. They bought us victory with their lives. Admiral Senthok looked horrified. You sent them to die? Without even telling us? Would knowing have changed the outcome? Captain Chen asked. Would it have saved more lives overall? The Admiral had no answer. Over the following weeks, Kethera found herself assigned to a human unit as a liaison and cultural observer. She watched them plan operations that the Confederation could never have imagined. The humans didn't just fight the Devourers. They studied them, adapted to them, and learned to think like them. They captured Devourer biotechnology and reverse-engineered it into weapons. They analyzed the enemy's feeding patterns and used that knowledge to set traps. The Devourers follow predictable routes, explained Commander Torres during a briefing. They always consume the most populated worlds first, then work outward. We can use this against them. How? Asked Colonel Yethtar, one of the few Confederation military officers who had joined the human operations. We evacuate the populations from target worlds, but leave behind decoy life signs, Torres said. When the Devourers arrive to feed, they'll find surprises instead of food. Kethera learned that these surprises included fusion bombs hidden in fake cities, computer viruses designed to infect biomechanical systems, and trap networks that could capture entire Devourer fleets. But what disturbed her most was how casually the humans discussed sacrifice. The Kepler system has to be abandoned, Captain Chen announced during one planning session. We can't defend it and maintain our offensive operations. That's 4 billion people, Admiral Senthok protested. And if we try to save them, we'll lose the war, Captain Chen replied. 20 billion more will die when the Devourers reach the core worlds. Sometimes you have to choose who lives and who dies. Kethera saw the pain in Captain Chen's eyes when she made these decisions. The humans weren't monsters. They were people carrying an impossible burden. They understood the weight of every choice, but they made the hard decisions anyway because someone had to. She began to understand why humanity had chosen exile 4,000 years ago. You didn't leave because you were violent, she said to Captain Chen one evening as they studied star charts. In the ship's command center. You left because you were too willing to sacrifice yourselves for others. Captain Chen looked up from the charts. Violence is just a tool. The real danger was what we became when we learned to use that tool effectively. We became the kind of people who could calculate the value of lives, who could decide that some people must die so others could live. But someone has to make those decisions. Yes, Captain Chen agreed, but no one should have to live with making them. That's why we left. We didn't want the galaxy to become like us. Cathara watched the humans work and began to see the strange love that drove them. They were willing to be hated, to be feared, to be the monsters in the dark so others could remain innocent. They carried the burden of necessary violence so the rest of the galaxy could stay peaceful. The war continued, and the humans revealed more of their capabilities. They had weapons that could crack planets, strategies that spanned decades, and a willingness to sacrifice themselves that bordered on the suicidal. But they also showed unexpected moments of gentleness. She watched human soldiers risk their lives to save Confederation civilians during evacuations. She saw them share their rations with refugee children. She witnessed their careful rituals for honoring the dead, both human and alien. We remember everyone who dies, Captain Chen explained when Cathara asked about the memorial ceremonies. Enemy and ally alike. Death is death regardless of which side it serves. As the human fleets pushed the Devourers back from the core worlds, other species began to react with a mixture of gratitude and fear. Some praised humanity as saviors, others worried about what would happen when the immediate threat was over. They're too powerful, she overheard one council member say. What if they decide to rule instead of protect? But Cathara had lived among the humans for months now. She had seen their exhaustion, their grief, their desperate determination to remain human despite everything the war demanded of them. She understood that their greatest strength wasn't their weapons or their tactics. It was their ability to choose restraint. They could conquer us easily, she told the council during one of her reports. But they won't. Not because they can't, but because they choose not to. That choice, made again and again despite the cost, is what makes them worthy of our trust. The war was turning in the galaxy's favor, but Cathara knew it was far from over. The humans had capabilities they hadn't yet revealed, weapons they hadn't yet deployed, and somewhere in the dark between galaxies more Devourers were stirring. The real test was still coming. But for the first time since the invasion began, Cathara felt hope. The humans had come back to save them, carrying 4,000 years of preparation and the willingness to pay any price for victory, even if that price was their own souls. 4,000 years of silence, the deadly humans who came to our rescue. The war had been raging for 8 months when Cathara witnessed humanity's true nature for the first time. She stood on the bridge of the human flagship Remembrance as Captain Chen received the worst possible news. The Devourers had adapted to human tactics faster than expected. Their biomechanical ships were evolving, learning to resist human weapons and counter human strategies. "Show me the Arcturus system," Captain Chen ordered. The holographic display revealed a human colony world under siege. 5 million humans lived on Arcturus Prime, along with 2 million Confederation refugees they had taken in during the evacuation of nearby systems. The Devourers had surrounded the planet with a feeding swarm unlike anything seen before. Estimated time until planetary consumption? Chen asked. 14 hours, replied Commander Torres. Maybe less. Admiral Senthok, who had become a permanent observer on the human flagship, leaned forward. What are our options? Captain Chen studied the tactical display with the cold calculation that had become her trademark. We can't break through their perimeter with conventional forces. The swarm is too large and too well coordinated. Then we surrender the system? Asked Colonel Yethtar, the Confederation officer who had been serving as a liaison. No, Chen said quietly. We escalate. She activated a secure communication channel that Cathara had never seen before. The face that appeared on screen belonged to a human she didn't recognize, older with silver hair and eyes like winter. Admiral Reyes, Chen said. Authorization Omega-7. We need the Prometheus Protocol. Admiral Reyes studied Chen's face for a long moment. You understand what you're asking for, Sarah. Once we deploy it, there's no going back. The galaxy will see what we really are. 7 million people are going to die if we don't act, Chen replied, including 2 million allies who trusted us to protect them. The Council will never forgive us. I'll live with their hatred if it means they stay alive to hate us. Admiral Reyes nodded slowly. Prometheus is authorized. Deployment in 30 minutes. The channel closed, leaving the bridge in tense silence. What's the Prometheus protocol? Cathara asked. Captain Chen turned to face her, and for the first time since awakening from 4,000 years of sleep, her mask of control slipped. Cathara saw fear in those eyes, not fear of the enemy, but fear of what humanity was about to become. Something we hoped never to use again, Chen said. 28 minutes later, a single human ship emerged from hyperspace near the Arcturus system. It was small compared to the massive Devourer swarm, no larger than a standard cruiser, but as it approached the feeding formation, space itself began to change around it. What is that? Admiral Senthok whispered. A planet killer, Captain Chen replied. We built 12 of them during the first Devourer War. This is the only one we brought out of storage. The weapon didn't fire in any conventional sense. Instead, it reached out with fields of force that violated everything Cathara understood about physics. Where those fields touched Devourer ships, matter simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not converted to energy, simply erased from reality. The Devourer swarm tried to respond, but their biomechanical adaptation couldn't counter a weapon that deleted the fundamental building blocks of existence. In 17 minutes, the entire feeding formation was gone. The planet below was saved, but the cost became apparent immediately. Captain, Commander Torres reported, his voice shaking. The Prometheus is gone. The weapon consumed the ship and crew during firing. How many? Chen asked. 3,000 volunteers. Captain Chen closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her face had become a mask of stone. Record their names? All of them. They died so others could live. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of ship systems. Cathara felt sick. She had just watched humanity deploy a weapon that could erase matter from existence, operated by people who knew it would kill them to use it. You have 11 more of those weapons, she said. Yes. And they all require their crews to die? Yes. But your people volunteered anyway. They always do, Captain Chen said softly. That's what makes us human. And what makes us dangerous. Over the following weeks, word of the Prometheus weapon spread throughout the galaxy. The reaction was swift and divided. Some species hailed humanity as ultimate protectors, willing to sacrifice anything for victory. Others began calling for limits on human military power. Cathara found herself caught in the middle of increasingly heated debates in the Confederation Council. They have weapons that can erase planets, argued Counselor Thexana. What happens when the Devourers are gone? What's to stop them from using those weapons on us? They just saved 7 million lives, Cathara replied, including 2 million of our own people, at the cost of making themselves into something that should not exist, Thexana shot back. No species should have that much power. But Cathara had seen something the Council hadn't. She had watched Captain Chen's face when the Prometheus fired. She had seen the grief, the self-loathing, the terrible understanding of what they had become. They're not becoming monsters, she told the Council. They're choosing to be monsters so we don't have to be. The argument was interrupted by an emergency alert. The Devourers had launched a massive counterattack, striking at 17 systems simultaneously. This wasn't random feeding, it was strategic warfare. The enemy was learning. Captain Chen's response was immediate and brutal. Human fleets deployed weapons and tactics that pushed the boundaries of what the Confederation considered acceptable. They used captured Devourer prisoners to gather intelligence. They deployed biological weapons that targeted the enemy's nervous systems. They sacrificed entire fleets as distractions while other forces struck at critical targets. Each victory came at a cost that horrified the galaxy's peaceful species. But each victory also saved millions of lives. Cathara watched it all from the bridge of the remembrance, seeing the toll the war was taking on humanity itself. The humans were winning, but they were becoming something darker with each battle. She saw it in their eyes, heard it in their voices, felt it in the way they moved through the ship's corridors. We're losing ourselves, Captain Chen admitted to her one evening as they stood in the ship's memorial hall, surrounded by holographic displays showing the names of the dead. Every choice we make, every weapon we deploy, every life we sacrifice, it all takes something away from what we used to be. But you keep fighting. Because someone has to, Chen replied. And because we're the only ones who can. The Confederation species are too good to do what needs to be done. That's why we left 4,000 years ago. And it's why we'll leave again when this is over. You're planning to leave again? Captain Chen looked at the memorial displays, thousands of names glowing softly in the dim light. Look around you, Cathara. Look at what we've become. Do you really think the galaxy will want us to stay when the war is over? Cathara had no answer. She was beginning to understand that humanity's greatest tragedy wasn't their capacity for violence, it was their willingness to sacrifice their own humanity to protect others. The war was nearing its climax. Intelligence reports indicated that the main Devourer force was gathering for a final assault on the galaxy's core worlds. Humanity was preparing for the ultimate battle, and Cathara knew that whatever weapons they deployed next would make the Prometheus Protocol look gentle by comparison. She also knew that when it was over, humanity would once again disappear into the darkness between stars, carrying the burden of what they had done so others could sleep peacefully. The galaxy's guardians were becoming its monsters, and they were doing it by choice because someone had to. 4,000 years of silence. The deadly humans who came to our rescue. The final battle began at the galaxy's heart, where the Devourers had gathered in numbers that blotted out the stars. Cathara stood beside Captain Chen on the bridge of the Remembrance, watching tactical displays that showed the true scope of humanity's last gamble. Every human ship in the galaxy was converging on the galactic core, along with what remained of the Confederation fleets. Total enemy count, Chen asked. 17,000 bioships, Commander Torres reported. They've been building this force for months, drawing resources from consumed worlds. Admiral Senthok studied the numbers with growing horror. Our combined fleets have maybe 3,000 ships. We're outnumbered more than 5 to 1. Numbers don't matter, Captain Chen said quietly, not for what we're about to do. She activated the fleet-wide communication system, her voice reaching every human vessel in the Armada. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Today we end the cycle. Today we make sure the Devourers never threaten anyone again. You all know the cost. You all volunteered anyway. History will remember what you do here. The channel closed. Around them, the bridge crew prepared for battle with the calm efficiency that Cathara had learned to associate with humans facing death. What aren't you telling us? She asked Chen. The truth, Chen replied. This isn't just a battle. It's a sacrifice. Before Cathara could ask what that meant, the Devourer fleet began its advance. 17,000 ships moving in perfect coordination. Their biomechanical forms writhing through space like living nightmares. The human response was unlike anything Cathara had witnessed in a year of war. Every human ship began broadcasting. The same signal. Not a communication, but something deeper. A resonance that reached into the quantum foundation of space itself. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Space around the human fleet began to change. Reality itself became unstable, crackling with energies that shouldn't exist. The Devourer advance slowed as their ships encountered fields of twisted physics that made their biomechanical systems malfunction. What is this? Admiral Senthok demanded. The neural web, Captain Chen said, her voice strained. Every human ship is linked together, using our crew's minds as processors for a quantum calculation that turns space itself into a weapon. Cathara watched the tactical display and realized the horrible truth. The neural energy powering this impossible weapon was coming from the human crews themselves. On every ship in the fleet, thousands of people were burning out their own minds to fuel humanity's ultimate defense. You're killing yourselves, she whispered. Yes, Chen agreed. All of us. But we're taking them with us. The weapon's effects spread outward from the human fleet like a wave of impossible physics. Where it touched Devourer ships, they simply ceased to function. Their biomechanical systems couldn't adapt to an environment where the laws of reality changed faster than they could evolve. But the cost was visible on every human face around her. Commander Torres collapsed at his station, blood streaming from his nose. Other crew members followed, their minds burning out as they fed more power into the neural web. How long can you maintain this? Cathara asked. Long enough, Captain Chen replied, her own voice growing weaker. The calculation is almost complete. When it finishes, the quantum resonance will create a permanent barrier around the galaxy. Nothing like the Devourers will ever be able to enter our space again. But you'll all be dead. That was always the plan, Kethara watched thousands of human ships drift powerless through space as their crews died at their stations. The Devourer fleet was in complete disarray, their ships tumbling helplessly through fields of twisted space-time. But the victory was coming at the ultimate price. "Stop this," she begged. "There has to be another way." Captain Chen looked at her with eyes that were already growing dim. "There is no other way. This is what we are, Kethara. This is what we chose to become. We are the sword that cuts in the darkness so others can live in the light." The neural web reached critical resonance. Across the galaxy, space itself rang like a struck bell, and a barrier of quantum energy settled into place that would last until the stars burned out. The Devourers were trapped in a pocket of normal space, cut off from the biomechanical energies they needed to survive. But as the weapon completed its work, Captain Chen collapsed. Kethara caught her as she fell, holding her as the last echoes of the neural web faded from her mind. "Did we win?" Chen whispered. "Yes," Kethara said through her tears. "You won. You saved everyone." Captain Chen smiled, and for a moment she looked like the peaceful explorer humanity had been 4,000 years ago. "Good, tell them. Tell them we kept our promise." She died in Kethara's arms as emergency lights flickered and failed throughout the ship. The battle was over. 17,000 Devourer ships drifted dead in space, their crews unable to survive in the quantum-poisoned environment the humans had created. The galaxy was safe, protected by a barrier that would keep such threats at bay forever. But the human fleet was silent. Millions of volunteers had burned out their minds to power humanity's final weapon. The ships could be salvaged, the technology recovered, but the people were gone. Kethara found herself in command of the Remembrance as rescue ships from the Confederation arrived to collect survivors. There weren't many. A few hundred humans scattered across the entire fleet, people who had been shielded from the neural web's effects or who had simply been strong enough to survive the mental burning. "What do we do now?" asked Lieutenant Morrison, one of the few human officers still alive. Kethara looked out at the dead fleet drifting among the stars. She thought of Captain Chen's final words, of humanity's promise to protect the galaxy no matter the cost. "We honor them," she said, "and we learn from them." In the months that followed, the galaxy struggled to process what had happened. Humanity had saved them all, but at the cost of nearly their entire species. Only a few thousand humans remained alive, scattered across a handful of ships. The Confederation Council offered them anything they wanted: worlds to colonize, resources to rebuild, honors and statues and eternal gratitude. The surviving humans politely declined. "We're leaving," Lieutenant Morrison explained to the assembled council. "Not because we're angry or disappointed, but because our job here is done." "Where will you go?" Counselor Thexana asked. "The galaxy's edge, dark space, wherever we're needed." Morrison gestured to the small group of humans behind him. "Others will join us. Some of your people have learned what we know, that sometimes peace must be defended by those willing to do violence. They'll come with us." Kethara stepped forward. "I'm going with them." "Kethara, no," Admiral Senthok protested. "You're one of our finest researchers. The galaxy needs you." "The galaxy needs what humanity represents," she replied. "Someone has to carry on their mission. Someone has to watch the darkness between stars and stand ready to fight when the next threat comes." She wasn't alone. Hundreds of Confederation citizens joined the human exodus: soldiers, scientists, philosophers, and ordinary people who had learned that sometimes love requires the willingness to do terrible things. As their small fleet prepared to depart for the galaxy's rim, Kethara stood on the observation deck of their lead ship and looked back at the peaceful core worlds they were leaving behind. "Do you think they'll remember us?" asked Lieutenant Morrison. "They'll remember the story," Kethara replied, "about the humans who came back from 4,000 years of exile to save a galaxy that no longer understood war. About the price of peace and the burden of protection. And when they tell that story to their children," Kethara smiled sadly, "they'll end it the way all good stories about guardians should end. We are not heroes. We are the sword you pray you'll never need to draw." The small fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying humanity's legacy into the dark between stars. Behind them, the galaxy settled into peace once again, protected by barriers both quantum and philosophical that would endure for millennia. And in the deep places where light failed to reach, the new guardians took up their watch, silent, patient, ready. The cycle would continue as it always had. Peace would flourish in the light because someone was willing to fight in the darkness. The deadly humans who came to their rescue had kept their promise, even unto death, and their spirit lived on in those who chose to follow them into exile, carrying the burden of necessary violence so others could remain innocent. The galaxy slept peacefully, protected by monsters who loved them enough to become what they hated. It was exactly as it should be.